May 24th, 1994, exactly 30 years ago today, I made a promise to God that I would come back to Turkey to serve long-term in ministry. I was 17 years old. I was an exchange student living in Mersin in the southeast of Turkey and staying with a Turkish host family, attending a Turkish high school, and it was a pivotal kind of point in my spiritual life because I was experiencing all kinds of existential doubts about my identity, about my faith, about whether God is real, whether Jesus is Lord, whether the Bible is the Word of God, whether this is the road that I want to walk with my life. And I was not comfortable with all of those insecurities that were becoming a kind of anxiety. And I remember a turning point kind of prayer. One night my host family was going out to dinner and I stayed home, and I put a cassette tape in, a mixtape of worship songs that somebody had sent to me in the mail, and I turned the volume up loud so that the neighbors wouldn't hear me crying and calling out to God loudly, which is exactly what I did. And I prayed a prayer in two parts that I remember distinctly. I said, God, knock me off my feet and make me know that you're real, and send Christians. I was feeling isolated and alone, in addition to having these pulling doubts in my soul about my faith. And I only knew at the time one Christian in all of the country. Her name was Donna, and we thankfully had seen each other a couple of times, and she had encouraged me, and she was serving in my hometown in ministry there, and she was the only Christian I knew in all of the country. I realized that I needed to be surrounded by believers. And the next morning I went to school knowing that this was going to be a kind of turning point in my life. Something was going to change. And the junior high teachers approached me right as I walked into school, asking if I would translate for a field trip. They wanted to take the junior high students to a ship that had docked in Mersin Harbor. They described it as a floating library where the crew speaks English, and there were books to browse in English that the English students could benefit from. So we put the kids on the school buses and went out to the ship, and there was a tour, and I was translating for the tour and seeing the various parts of the ship. And the tour described this crew of more than 300 people that had come from more than 30 countries all over the world, and describing the places where they had been and the adventures that they had gotten into along the way. And they ends up in this bookstore area where the kids are able to browse the books and buy books if they want. And I saw a guy walk by with a Bible, that distinct Bible look with the ribbon hanging out, and I stopped him in the hallway. It probably felt to him like I was assaulting him, in fact, and he was from Germany. I had a very quick conversation, and I asked him very bluntly, "Are you a Christian?" He said yes, was probably a bit taken aback by the directness of my question. But on this Friday afternoon, I asked him, "Is there a worship service on Sunday?" And he went to get permission and got permission for me to attend the worship service on Sunday. And I was immediately thinking about this prayer that I had prayed the night before. Is God answering that prayer to send Christians? Is this the Christian that God has sent? That afternoon, we went back to school, and after school, I didn't return right to home. I came first to this ship, thinking maybe that I would run into that guy again. And I didn't see him again. But there, sitting with the crew, was Donna, the only Christian I knew in this country. And she invited me to come and sit with her and some of the crew members. And we started a short conversation, and she immediately recognized that I was somewhat clueless, and she asked, "Don't you know what this is?" And I explained that I didn't, and she explained that this ship of 300 people from 30 nations, on which I thought I had found a Christian, was actually a ship of 300 Christians from more than 30 nations. And from my perspective, they were, on that day, all there for me. God had knocked me off my feet, and I think to make me know that he is real, and he sent Christians. I worked on the ship for a week, translating the overhead announcements in the bookstore area and helping with some odd jobs on the ship. And I took that experience not only as an answer to my desperate prayer for Christians, but also as a call. And on that day, May 24th, 1994, I made a promise to God to return to Turkey long term. It took me a while to get there. Went to finish high school and an undergraduate degree and a couple of years teaching in Brazil and a graduate degree and a couple of kids. And in 2006, after having traveled back and forth to Turkey every year between 96 and 2006 for a month or two at a time, we finally moved there in 2006 and lived in Turkey until 2016, and then moved to Cyprus, where I'm here now with my wife and 4 children, and have been serving here in Cyprus for more than 7 years now. In the days after that initial experience, and understanding it to be a call from God, I found out on the ship that they had never planned to dock in Mersin Harbor. In fact, the ship was on its way to Cyprus. And in the middle of the night, some phone calls were made and plans were canceled, and Cyprus no longer wanted the doulos, and so they had to make last-minute plans to dock somewhere else. And it turns out they found an opening in Mersin Harbor, and so there was the doulos on that next morning. God, in fact, did something great. And I took it as an answer to prayer and as a call 30 years ago.